All right, welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Hill Country Homestead. Now, this time we're going to be looking at security cameras. When I did the video talking about doing the whole Homestead Wi-Fi mesh network, I mentioned that was critical to implementing my security cameras. And down in the comments, somebody asked, well, hey, how about sharing a bit more information about your security cameras? I have to do that too. So that's this video. Why did I choose the cameras that I chose? What were my goals? What were my requirements? And what did I ultimately end up with? And most importantly, am I happy with it? So with that, let's jump right in. And don't forget, like, subscribe. Thank you. All right, let's start with my requirements. I wanted a standalone DIY friendly system. I didn't want anything crazy difficult, and I didn't want anything that locked me into a single vendor's proprietary system. I wanted no mandatory cloud services. At the time of this recording, it seems like every camera vendor is trying to just lock you into monthly fees and more monthly fees and then more monthly fees. And it's just crazy. I wanted none of that. I wanted a hardwired option for the house. It may sound paranoid, but any chucklehead can go buy a Wi-Fi jammer on Temu. They're cheap. I wanted something, at least for protecting the house, that was completely hardwired and was impervious to attacks like that. Now, I did want a Wi-Fi option for cameras on other parts of the property, outbuildings, up by the gate, not necessarily the house itself. Critical to me, I wanted the ability to record 24/7. I wanted to be able to rewind the tape, roll back to any situation, any timestamp, and you'd be surprised, not all camera systems will support that. And also important to me, part of the not being locked into a vendor, I wanted a camera system that was compatible with third-party systems. If I ever decide to switch recorders, I just wanted it to work. If I ever decided to use a server-based recorder like Blue Iris or something like that, I wanted my cameras to still work. So those were all of my requirements. Now, one thing I know I did not want was the older style analog security camera systems. I'm not going to read through that laundry list of specs. They're all out of date, but it's easy to spot one of these older systems. And the ones that I've used include Zosi, QC, XVIM, and Yaskamo. I would not touch any of those vendors ever again. My experience with every single one of them is it works great for a month, it works okay for 2, 3, 4 months, and then you start having problems. Either the cameras start getting foggy, the night vision goes away, the recorder, the hard drive start clicking and then stop recording. Yeah, I'm not going to go to any of those super cheap consumer grade systems anymore. And especially, I'm going to stay away from anything analog, meaning if it has that yellow connector, the BNC connector for video, it has that red connector, the barrel jack for power, that's indicative of an older analog CCTV type system. Staying away from that. I mean, my golly, it's 2026. Let's get with the times. We're going to go with IP or network cameras that use Ethernet. That is what you want for a modern camera system. Now, the huge benefits for going to IP cameras, that includes resolution. You can get much higher resolution, much clearer cameras that will work especially at distance. Cabling is so much easier. You just have that single Ethernet cable to worry about. Smart features, you can have AI functionality, human detection, pet detection, package detection, vehicle detection. remote access. I can view my cameras anywhere in the world where I happen to be. Now, a lot of those old CCTV cameras promised that, but of those vendors I just put on screen a minute ago, I couldn't get any of them to work. And I mean, I'm not an IT idiot, but I'm sorry, when you have to start going into the admin screens of your router, you have to start opening security holes in your own router, you have to do port forwarding, it's just a nightmare. With IP cameras, you don't have any of those security problems. It just works. In addition to infrared night vision, some of the newer cameras have color night vision, which is really nice. And it's scalable. If you want to add new cameras, it's super quick and easy. All right, so that's reasons to go with IP cameras instead of analog. Now, if you go to, say, Amazon and you search on security cameras, you are going to find a boatload of options. But I did not choose Ring, Eagle Eye, Google Nest, Verkada, Arlo, Blink, Wise, or any other camera vendor that requires a cloud account. I'm sorry, I am so done with cloud services, at least when they're mandatory. And every one of those vendors is notoriously bad about requiring a cloud account and just nickel and diming you to death month after month after month with subscription fees. Now, they'll lie to you. Oh no, the cloud is not required. But without the cloud account, you get tiny little 10-second video clips, useless for anything meaningful. Their system only kind of half works without a cloud account. So stay away from those vendors that require you to use cloud services. Now, what I did end up choosing was Reolink. Now, in my experience, if you really divide up security cameras, they really fall into two big groups. Down at the bottom, you've got super cheap, consumer grade. They work for a couple of months and they start to fall apart. And then at the other extreme, you've got the enterprise systems, and they're amazing, but they cost a fortune and you need an entire IT department to get them to work. And that's why I like Reolink. They have this kind of sweet spot in the middle. Oh, and sidebar, I am not paid by Reolink. I have no connection to Reolink. I don't know anybody at Reolink. Everything I'm talking about today, I paid for with my own money. Nobody biased me in any way. But Reolink has this kind of nice sweet spot in the middle. They've got way more reliability and functionality than the cheap little consumer items, but they're way easier to configure than the enterprise level security systems. So I really like where Reolink has positioned themselves in the market. No monthly fees. You buy the cameras, they're yours, you own them, and they just work. Now, there is a cloud option available, but if you choose not to go that route, it doesn't degrade your cameras. It doesn't cause any problems. Now, the reason you might want to go for the cloud option is if you're like a business owner and you want an offsite backup of all of your recordings, in case of a burglary or something. That I totally get. But I love that Reolink makes it optional. I like their lineup of cameras. If you don't need something really expensive, they have some inexpensive low-resolution cameras. You just need to see if there's activity. Great. On the other end, you want to get up into these super high megapixel, super high resolution cameras. They have those too. Local first privacy. Again, no cloud account required, but you can record all the video footage locally, and that means no data mining. Some of those vendors on that previous slide, once you get into a cloud account, I believe it was Google Nest, got in big trouble because they found out that they had some contractors, some people working for them, who are going in a back door and viewing their customer accounts and watching people get undressed in their own bedrooms. Oh my gosh. And you have vendors like Ring, where the police would just call up Ring and say, oh yeah, something happened at, 345, Pine Place. Send us the video. And they'll just scarf up any of those Ring cameras that are on that street and just send it. No judge involved, no requirement to disclose to you that they just took all of your video footage and, sent it to the police. Yikes. And that's why I love Reolink. I process my own recordings on my own hardware. Nobody gets to see the video but me, unless I choose to share it. Easy app setup? Boy, ain't that the truth. I had the app on my phone up and running within a couple of minutes. And then I installed the Windows app. Now they have a Mac app as well. I'm not a Mac guy, so I haven't tried it. But I know that the Android phone app and the Windows app, they both just installed beautifully. They were up, they were configured in minutes. It was not the nightmare that some of those old CCTV analog systems were. Oh, and this is critical. ONVIF support, ONVIF. That is an open industry standard for security cameras. As long as your vendor has ONVIF support, then theoretically, those cameras will work with any other recording device, even from other vendors. It will work with software recorders. I mentioned Blue Iris earlier. There's several others. I really wanted that ONVIF support so that even though I'm using the Reolink infrastructure right now, if I outgrow it, I can just switch to different recorders, different third-party systems. And also this allows it to be able to be implemented in things like smart home systems or Amazon Echo devices for playback. It's just an open system. Storage redundancy. All of the cameras I have, they record to an SD card physically installed in the cameras, and then a second copy of all video gets stored on a network video recorder that I have inside my media cabinet, inside the Homestead. So I have backups. If somebody breaks into the house and they steal the NVR, well, if they don't steal the cameras, I still have all the footage on the SD cards. Or if they break onto the property and they steal a couple of cameras, I still have the recordings on the NVR inside. And if you want to go for that cloud storage, optional, but that would give you a third level of redundancy. So that way, if they steal the cameras and they steal the NVR, well, you just log into your cloud account and you can pull all your video down. And then finally, this is the big thing that really sold me on Reolink: data and power flexibility. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to pick on one of their newest cameras, the Track Mix. When Reolink sells a camera, they sell multiple versions of that same camera. Now, we're going to start on the left and work our way across. The one that I have is the Track Mix PoE. That stands for Power over Ethernet. So that means in the case of the camera I have, one Ethernet cable provides power for the camera and retrieves the video signal from the camera and sends it into my network. So I literally plug one cable in the camera and it works. Now, running Ethernet to all of your cameras may not be convenient. So same camera, but now we have the Track Mix Wi-Fi. So now instead of getting power over an Ethernet cable, if you look at this blue bar underneath, it plugs into the wall, 120 volts. So it gets power locally by just plugging in, but then it sends the video stream over Wi-Fi. I already have a really good mesh Wi-Fi network. I have another video if you want to see how I set that up. I'll put that down in the comments. But now you get the same functionality, but without having to run a dedicated Ethernet cable. Well, what if you want that camera and you have access to Wi-Fi, but there's no power? Well, then you have the TrackMix battery. Instead of plugging in the wall, it has a small solar panel that charges up a little battery. So during the day, it works on solar. At night, it runs off that battery backup. And it still communicates the video signal over Wi-Fi. Now, what if you don't have power and you don't have Wi-Fi? Well, you're still not out of luck. You have the TrackMix LTE. Now, I'm going to recuse myself. If you have any questions, don't put them in the comments on this one. I have never used any of the LTE cameras. But my understanding, you just go down to the cell phone store. You buy a SIM card, just like you'd put in a cell phone. You plug the SIM card into the TrackMix LTE, and it now sends that video signal over 5G or 4G back to your smartphone. So you can still have that remote viewing with no power and no Wi-Fi. Now, if you have power but no Wi-Fi, well, then you have the TrackMix wired LTE. It'll plug into 120 volts, but it still uses that 4G, 5G network, the cellular network, for transmitting video. Now, before we leave this slide, though, one important thing that I don't think is as obvious to new customers, but if you want 24/7 recording, if you want to be able to roll back to any moment in time in those recordings, then you need either Ethernet power or 120 volt power. Those cameras support 24/7 recording. Once you get into batteries or cellular connections, those cameras do what's called event recording. When they detect motion, they'll start recording. They will record for, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever you set it for. And then they cut off, they stop, and they wait for the next motion to be detected. And that means you might miss critical details if they happen at the 62-second mark or something like that. So that is one thing to be aware of. Now, at the Homestead, I only use cameras that support 24/7 recording. Now, a crash course on camera types. This is not exhaustive. There are others, but these are kind of the main ones you'll run into. Fixed cameras, that's the bread and butter. They're relatively inexpensive. You mount them to a wall, aim them in the direction you want to capture. Boom, you've got video. Not a lot of adjustability. You have to order them in advance to be, for example, either wide angle or telephoto. And, they are what they are. They don't change. Now, related to that, you have zoom cameras. Now, zoom cameras have a similar form factor, but I can mount it, say, on a fence, aim it at a gate, and if it's a little bit too wide, I don't really care about the walls on either side of the gate. I can manually zoom it in a little bit until I just see the gate opening. Or maybe you own a business and you want to mount it on the ceiling and you want to zoom in so just the cash register fills the entire video screen. Because it's kind of useless when you're trying to watch the cash register, and the cash register is this tiny little dot in the middle of this giant TV screen. Well, a zoom camera will let you zoom in to get the exact thing you're trying to watch, in as tight of focus as possible. Now, PTZ cameras, pan, tilt, zoom. These are the ones you see on, Hollywood movies, like in a casino, where they follow somebody through the casino floor and then they zoom in on their hands. They're really kind of high tech, kind of cool. They're not that expensive, to be honest. And this is where you can remotely control. You can move the camera view side to side, move it up and down, zoom in, zoom out. Those are available. Now, these bottom two, they're relatively new. I believe they're kind of unique to Reolink, but they now have dual lens cameras, and I'm using several of these. They give you all of the benefits of what used to be called a fisheye lens, but without all the horrible distortion. It will give you an extreme wide angle if you're trying to see an entire yard or an entire parking structure or something like that. You'll see some examples here in a minute. And then down at the bottom, the track mix. This is kind of special because it is a pan tilt camera. It is a dual lens camera, but instead of being two of the same lens, one is a wide angle lens, one is a telephoto lens. So you get that wide shot and you get that zoomed in effect at the same time. And you'll see some examples of that here in a few minutes. All right, so those are your different types of cameras. I didn't include everything. I didn't include doorbell cameras and things like that, but these are the main ones. Now, your storage options. I'll do this quickly. We already touched on this, but all of the Reolink cameras, at least the ones I have, all record to a micro SD card physically inserted in the camera itself. And if you're budget challenged, you can start that way. The whole system will work just with cameras recording onto themselves and then reporting back to your cell phone for monitoring. But then up in the chain, we get into NVRs, network video recorders. This is where you have kind of a home base that all of your cameras report back to, and it records a second copy of all of the video from all of the cameras in one location. And this can be really convenient because the NVRs, most of them have an HDMI output. You can plug it right into your big screen TV and you can get that, 8 channels at once, 10 channels at once view, like you see in those security shacks on, Hollywood movies and stuff. And then over on the right is the Reolink Cloud. Again, I don't use the Reolink Cloud, but if you wanted a third kind of off-site storage tier for extra security, that is available for a monthly fee. All right, now, those NVRs. It gets a little bit confusing because Reolink has 3 different categories. Over on the left, we have the home hubs. I will be honest, I'm not a fan, but I'm also not in the target market. I don't work for Reolink. I haven't had a conversation with their product manager, but my takeaway from reading all of their marketing literature, these home hubs are really intended for people who are like renters, people who only use the Wi-Fi versions of the cameras. They can't drill holes. They can't do permanent installs. The Home Hub Mini would be great if you have a little studio apartment. The Home Hub would be great if you have like a 2-bedroom apartment. And then the Home Hub Pro would be good if you rent, maybe a small house or something like that. To my knowledge, they don't do the 24/7 recording. They do event-based recording, and they're really optimized for Wi-Fi cameras. Now, if we skip over to the right side, though, the traditional NVRs, the RLN8 and the RLN16, these are a device. They typically would sit either, next to your router, maybe in your home office, or they can be positioned in your media center, next to your big TV. The RLN8, their naming is a little bit confusing because when I bought one of these, and when I bought it, it was considered an 8-channel recorder. Well, 2 firmware upgrades later, and now it magically is a 12-channel recorder. Now, how does that work? Well, on the back of the RLN8, there are 8 physical Ethernet ports, so it will support 8 cameras physically connected using Ethernet cables, but it also can support 4 additional Wi-Fi cameras. Now, that was added after I bought the thing. So when I bought it, again, it was an 8-channel NVR, and now magically through software, it's now a 12-channel NVR. It's just 4 of those would have to be Wi-Fi channels for Wi-Fi cameras. And it's the same thing for the RLN16. Originally, it was a 16-channel recorder, and it has 16 Ethernet ports on the back. But now, as long as you add additional Wi-Fi cameras, it will record 24 channels. So theoretically, 24 cameras at the same time. Now, I mentioned I have one of these, but that's at my city house. When it came time to add an NVR for the Homestead, I ended up going with this one in the middle. It's a Wi-Fi NVR hybrid. It is an NVR. When I bought it, it was advertised as a 12-camera NVR, but it doesn't have any of those power over Ethernet jacks on the back. Instead, it has one Ethernet port, and it's intended to be plugged into a dedicated Reolink PoE switch. And I'll show you that here in a minute. At least that's the way they designed it. But then it also has these Wi-Fi 6 antennas on the back. So it's also optimized to receive signals from Wi-Fi cameras. But the reason I bought this for the ranch, A, it was newer than the RLN8. It supported some newer camera types that I liked, like the track mix, whereas now the RLN8 supports the track mix as well. Again, it had a firmware update. But it was cheaper. If you look at the price, the RLN8 is $300 US, and the RLN12W was $288. So even though I did not need that Wi-Fi functionality at all, I went ahead and bought it because it had the 16-channel recording at a lower price point. All right, so those are your recording options. Again, if you want 24/7 recording, stick with the 3 on the right. Now, the features included with those NVRs, there's a lot of AI built in. It will do automatic human detection, vehicle detection, pet or animal detection. So that way, when you go back to review footage, instead of having to review, 24 hours of recordings, you can filter it and say, okay, show me only time periods that include humans. Only show me time periods that include vehicles. So now, instead of having to review 24 hours of video, you only have to review 2 or 3 hours of video. Only those segments that have vehicles or have people in them. Instant push alerts. I have my NVR set up, so if it detects humans or vehicles, it automatically alerts my cell phone, and no matter where I am in the world, I then have remote live view. I can bring that screen up and I can see exactly what alerted my camera system. And then bottom right, color night vision. I currently only have one camera with the color night vision. It is kind of cool, but All the rest of my cameras just have traditional infrared black and white, and it works great. All right, so what am I actually using on the Homestead? Up until now, this has kind of been an introduction, theory, concepts. Right now, I have a router. If you have internet in your house, you have a router. A lot of us, it was provided by the cable company, the telephone company, the fiber, whoever you're getting your internet from, they probably provided your router. Now, I'm a bit of a freak. I went and bought my own router. So my internet signal comes in to my router. Coming out of my router, I am feeding my Deco Wi-Fi mesh. So the entire Homestead is just flooded with a beautiful Wi-Fi signal. So far, nothing exotic. Again, down in the description, if you want to see the video on how I implemented my Wi-Fi mesh network, I have a whole long video on that. But so far, this is pretty typical of most homes. Now, when it comes to Wi-Fi cameras, that's easy. You just install the camera and it starts communicating to your Wi-Fi system. Now, what about the PoE cameras though? Well, remember I mentioned I purchased a dedicated Reolink switch, but I didn't connect it to my NVR. That's where I'm a little bit non-standard. I connected this Reolink power over Ethernet switch to my router. So this one non-powered Ethernet cable makes this Reolink switch part of my network. And now 8 of these jacks are available now. So any of my PoE cameras, I just plug them right in. That one Ethernet cable provides power for the camera and collects the video signal and brings it back into my network. That's it. Any of my PoE cams plug into that switch. Any of my Wi-Fi cams just connect to my Wi-Fi mesh network. And if you're sharp, you're looking at that and you're saying, well, wait a minute, where's the NVR? How are you doing recordings? Well, in the TV room, I have another Deco Wi-Fi mesh node, and that has an Ethernet jack on the back, which connects to my NVR. So my NVR has no connection to anything other than my Deco. And through the Wi-Fi network, this NVR can see all of my Wi-Fi cameras, all of my PoE wired cameras, everything. And that way it's able to do all of those recordings, but it does it right next to the TV, and I can connect it via the HDMI cable, and I can review and monitor all of my cameras. All right, so now we're getting serious. These are the actual cameras that I'm using at the Homestead. Now, on the far left, the Duo 3 PoE. That is one of their newest models, super high resolution, 16 megapixels, basically 8 megapixels per lens. And I use that to monitor the backyard. Now that is a wired connection, so it can push more video. Next to that, we have its little brother, the Duo 2 Wi-Fi. Now, at the time of recording, I don't think there's a Duo 3 Wi-Fi available. I think that's just too much video to try and push over Wi-Fi. So the Duo 2 Wi-Fi, it's only 8 megapixels, basically 4 megapixels per lens, but it plugs into the wall and the video signal gets sent over a Wi-Fi connection. Then out at my gate, I have my track mix PoE, and also out at the gate, I have my battery video doorbell. And then inside the house in a few places, I have these new E1 Pros. And honestly, this was an experiment for me at under $60. I just wanted to see if they were any good, and I was pleasantly surprised. And then, as mentioned before, recording the whole mess, I have that RLN12W, and it does all of my recordings. All right, so where is this all located? If you're new to Hill Country Homestead, this is an aerial view of the front part of my property. All told, the homestead's about 20 acres. It's about 1/8 of a mile up the driveway to get to the house structure. So in the bottom right, we have the house. We have the well house in the bottom left. And then on the left side of the driveway, we have the garage and the shop. So it's pretty spread out. So the first one I want to talk about is that Duo 2, the Wi-Fi version of the dual lens camera. Now that I have mounted on the garage, that's just too far to try and run an Ethernet cable all the way back to the house. So I went with the Wi-Fi version, and it's pointed so that it covers the entire parking area, the entire front of the house, and the entire side of the house. And here is the view that I get from it. Now, this is the Reolink Microsoft Windows desktop application. And this is a view that I get, over 1,000 miles away. So this is, basically as bad as it gets, and it's pretty good. Now, those dual cameras, notice on the left side here, you're literally seeing the wall of the garage. And then all the way around on the right, you're seeing the wall of the garage. It is a full 180-degree view. So there is no sneaking up on this camera. All right, so that is the Wi-Fi version. The Duo 3, the big brother, the high resolution version, I have that mounted on the back wall of the homestead, and it's pointing out towards the backyard. And the view we get from that, again, wall to wall coverage, and it covers the entire back area of the home. And honestly, I'm pretty excited. Between two cameras, we can see about 75% of the area where somebody could approach the home. It's just the far side, which is unlikely. Now, long term, I do plan to add 2 more cameras, and that way we'll have full perimeter security. But as of right now, we have about 75% perimeter security with just 2 cameras. All right, now let's go inside. On the far right side of the house, we're going to drop in one of those E1. Now, I actually have 3 of these. I'm not going to bother showing them all, but I'll put one inside the house. We'll point it towards the back. And for a cheap $60 camera, or under $60 camera, it does an amazingly good job, especially considering it has the pan tilt functionality. I can swing it to the right, swing it to the left, up, down. It's pretty cool. And now if we move up to the gate up at the top, we have that video doorbell. I have a whole other video on implementing the video doorbell up at the gate, so we're not going to cover it here. But I do want to talk about that track mix PoE. The track mix is mounted right there in the corner of the gate wall. And to the right of this screenshot, I only have 3 neighbors and then the street dead ends. So I really wanted to point it the other direction. And now I have a view of anybody driving up the street, the entire driveway, and the gate. So again, this is in that Reolink remote desktop app. This is the default view that I get. On the left, I can see a bit of the gate. I can even see my little Amazon Dropbox here. I can see the entire driveway. And I can see right up the road anybody coming down our semi-private street here. So first, this is the track mix camera that I have up by the gate. You can tell by that split screen view. The upper screen is the wide angle lens of the track mix. And then the lower channel, that is the telephoto view of that track mix. Now, it doesn't mean a whole lot right now because it's kind of centered in the middle of the driveway. But the track mix is a PTZ camera, pan tilt zoom. So that means I can just hover over the upper image, click on that little PTZ icon there, and that will pop up the PTZ controls. And you can see that I have the little arrows up there. If I click on that right-hand arrow with my mouse, I'll click it 3 times, and you see the camera just panned off to the right. If I click the left arrow 3 times, well, once that signal travels 1,300 miles, it then pans back to the left. Now that is kind of nice if you want to like manually monitor and zoom in on something or see something happening. But what I really like is down here towards the bottom, there are presets, and you can go in, predetermine these. So let's say I want to see, my Amazon Dropbox, see if anything's been dropped off. I'll just click on deliveries here, and everything will just automatically pan and tilt to the exact spot that I have pre-selected. And now I can see that the lid's closed, nobody's been in there. If I want to see my mailbox, I'll just click on the mailbox preset. And again, everything will just pan and tilt over, and I get a nice close-up view of my mailbox. Now those are presets, but there's also, you can set a monitor point. Now what the monitor point does is after a set amount of time, and you can change that, if there's no action, no movement, what position should the camera automatically go back to? And I have mine set to just that kind of wide angle view where you can still see a bit of the gate on the left, you can see the street on the right. And if I talk long enough, come on, baby, move. It should just automatically reposition to that monitor point. I think I have mine set for 60 seconds. Of course, when you're talking live, that seems like forever. And there it goes. It goes right back to the static monitor point. Now, when you're doing dual channel like this, you are getting a lower resolution because it's trying to feed 2 video signals at the same time. Now, if I were to get rid of that kind of close-up view at the bottom, I'll just double click on this upper image. So now we're using only that upper image. Well, down on this lower toolbar, I'll click on low, change it to wide angle clear. Since I'm only trying to push one video stream now, I can actually choose a higher resolution. And there you go. You can see it's a lot more crisp, a lot more sharp now. Now I still have all those pan, tilt, zoom functions. Again, if I go to my presets, even in this sharper view, if I click on deliveries, again, it's going to swing over. It's going to show me my little delivery bin, but at a higher resolution than last time. But I can only view one video stream at a time. I can't see both the wide angle and the telephoto. And I could have brought up the telephoto view the same way and still used those presets. But that's an example of the pan tilt functionality of the track mix and with its dual lens capabilities. All right, now for something I haven't talked about yet. One of the neat things about the track mix camera, it has built-in AI tracking. So notice as I walk around the area, with no human operating that camera, it's going to start to pivot and turn and it will literally track me as I'm walking around. Now, I love that feature because if somebody does come kind of, poking around my gate, when they see that camera literally pivot around and track them, yeah, they know they're being watched. So that helps keep honest people honest. So, with just a handful of cameras, we have pretty good coverage at the homestead. But this is just a starting point. It is going to get better as we add a few more. Alrighty, so that's where we stand at the moment. Again, a few more cameras inside the house, but once you saw that E1 Pro, didn't think a lot of value was in showing the others. I'm really happy with the system. I'm thrilled with the way it works. I'm thrilled with the coverage we get, the quality of the images, and the fact that I can just, pull it up on my phone and I can see those cameras anywhere in the world. As long as I have a Wi-Fi signal, I can see my cameras. So I'm super happy. Now, I do have some future plans. When these come to fruition, if they come to fruition, I'll do a future video on that. But one of the things that does intrigue me is there is a third-party NVR software that I could run on my NAS drive on my network. It's called Blue Iris. And one of the neat things about Blue Iris is it has automatic license plate reading capabilities. So one of my crazy ideas is I do have one of those fixed position zoom cameras. If I were to mount that near the gate, pointing and fairly well zoomed in, it would be able to detect the front license plate of any vehicle coming up the driveway. And I could preload into Blue Iris a list of license plate numbers for all of my vehicles, all of my family, friends who are just allowed free access. And so camera would detect the license plate. Blue Iris would be able to extract the plate number. If it matched a pre-approved list, it could then communicate to the smart home system, which could then operate a relay, which would automatically open the gate. I know that sounds like a lot of steps, but the end result would be that, hey, if I know you, you don't have to click a button, you don't have to call, you just drive up to my gate and the gate opens. If it's a license plate that it does not detect, well, then the gate doesn't open and you're back to, punching in a code or, calling the house. So lots of ideas for the future, but as you've seen, Reolink is what I went with. You've seen some of my implementation, the way I do my recordings. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was beneficial. Again, I'd really appreciate a like if you're still here with us. We're really trying to get this channel going. A subscribe would be even better, but thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of today and an even better rest of your week.